Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. On the MTC call sheet today, I'm going to talk about the state of the AFC West. So I was in the NFC East last week, and I want to talk about the state of the AFC West. The Hall of Fame game just happened this past week, and I think this is a great indicator of what I think this division will be. Now, my Chain Gang chatter, we're going to bring you all things NFL. I'm going to answer your questions via social media. And in my nonsense narrative, especially when it came to the Green Bay Packers, because this has been a narrative for I don't know how long. You have to have a number one wide receiver, meaning a wide receiver drafted in the first round to be successful or to be a Super Bowl champion. And it's just not true. And I've got the numbers and the stats to show you that's not true. And last but not least, there's a quarterback in the NFC South that people left for dead that was even benched. And I think it was the best thing for him, and it had nothing to do with him, but everything to do with the organization. And now I think he's currently on the rise and is going to be what a lot of people thought he should be and what he was in college. All that and more here on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with the opening toss. So if I'm talking about the state of the AFC West, let's kind of go back so I can give you a full picture. 588 winning percentage for this division last year. Tied for the best in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East. And the reason I said the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East is because Buffalo was the lion's share of that division. We're looking at three teams in the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Broncos that made the playoffs. The only other division was the NFC North. And the AFC West had 40 total wins in this division, only second to the NFC North that had 45. High tides raise all boats. Have you heard that before? I wanted to sit back and kind of think about how I could illustrate this division. Because I've said this before, I kind of equated this with the SEC and college football. I said that Nick Saban might have been the best thing for college football in the SEC because he made teams get better. I think that's exactly what the Kansas City Chiefs have done in this division. They've made teams get better. And how do you know these teams have gotten better? Well, one I just told you, they had three teams that were in the playoffs last year, and the Vegas Raiders were not that team that were in the playoffs. They weren't good record-wise, but they were very competitive. Even within their division, even not winning a game, they were still competitive. Look at what this division has done now. Jim Harbaugh is the head coach for the Chargers. We know Andy Reid's been the head coach of the Chiefs, has won 3 Super Bowls with the Chiefs. Sean Payton is now in Denver. Regardless of how he left New Orleans, and I think that's another conversation for another day, Sean Payton left New Orleans in a situation, salary cap-wise, that they have to clean up, and they're not good. But he is a good coach. And now they've brought in Pete Carroll, who is a Super Bowl champion. And this division, think about this, has two coaches that not only thrived in college, Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh, but have thrived in the NFL. Both of those coaches have won national championships at the collegiate level. Of course, Pete Carroll with USC and Jim Harbaugh with Michigan. And Pete Carroll, Andy Reid, and Sean Payton have all won Super Bowls. And Jim Harbaugh has coached in a Super Bowl. So coaching-wise, this is what it takes to develop a program. This is what it takes to develop a division. But when I look at teams like the Chargers in this division, everybody wants to crown Justin Herbert, and I think that's where it starts. And it starts with the tone that his head coach has sent, because we understand how much Jim Harbaugh really loves Justin Herbert. I think physically Justin Herbert is second to none in the NFL. But I continue to say this, guys, physical talent and production are two different things. 7-24 is what I want you to focus on right now. 7-24 is the record of the Chargers with Justin Herbert as the starting quarterback against winning teams since he was drafted in 2020. And all I'm saying is, I'm not debating whether or not Justin Herbert can get the job done. I'm just simply debating that he hasn't gotten the job done, and that's no debate. Now, again, the reason I said the Chargers and Justin Herbert, because it's not just Justin Herbert, guys. I understand that Anthony Lynn was his coach when he got drafted. Then he had Brandon Staley, whom a lot of people thought was one of the worst time managers and game managers at the head coaching spot in history, okay? And now he's got Jim Harbaugh, and they won 11 games and went to the playoffs. But think about how Justin Herbert played. Think about him being a guy who only threw 3 picks last year. And I told my producer this before the show. That is a product of the system that Jim Harbaugh wants them to run. And I think it's a smart system. This has nothing to do with me berating Justin Herbert, because he's not designed to throw a lot of interceptions because they're a run-first team, which I think is good. But when they got into the playoffs and they couldn't be run first because of the way the game was being run and the way the game was dictating you operate your offense, he threw 4 picks. More picks in one game in the playoff than he threw the entire season. I just want to know, can Justin Herbert be the guy who can still operate your offense, manage the game like all great quarterbacks are supposed to do, but when you need him to be the guy, he ends up being the guy. That's all. I have the thought that their run game in LA for the Chargers will be phenomenal. Their defense, in terms of their scoring defense, was the best last year. I think they'll be good again. We just need to know if they can take that step in terms of their quarterback being the game manager and also being the guy who can win the game instead of throwing it away. The Vegas Raiders are a team who, again, will be competitive, but they have an identity. I think this is going to be the new black and blue division of the NFL. You know how we used to call, what was it, the AFC Central when it was the Central, then it became the North with the Steelers and the Ravens, the black and blue division. I think the AFC West is the new black and blue division because all of these teams, I think, will be dedicated to running the football, even the Chiefs, and are going to have good defenses. So the Vegas Raiders have done something to me that's very, very intriguing, and I don't know if you paid attention to it. They haven't had a quote-unquote franchise quarterback in the past 4 or 5 seasons. Now, they've also been trying to get the head coach position together, you know, whether it's Antonio Pierce and now you bring in Pete Carroll. They've had issues there as well as at the quarterback position, but they go and trade for Geno Smith, and they've been building around, especially offensively, the quarterback. When you draft Brock Bowers and you draft Michael Mayer, then you draft Ashton Genty, right? So there are opportunities for them to be good offensively, especially if they want to be a run-first team who runs a lot of 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight end, and then give the ball to Genty and do play action, which Geno Smith is good at. And he's a leader, and he's a veteran. So they've kind of built around the most important position in football. So I think when the time comes, even if they're not that good this year, they can be in position to get a quarterback of the future because I don't think they've done it, and I think they haven't wanted to mortgage draft capital to get it because they didn't feel like they were ready. So this is a team whom I seen they look to be building something internally. You just can't recognize it yet because it hasn't hit the surface. We know what the Kansas City Chiefs will be. There's also been a lot of talk about the Chiefs when it comes to this might be the first year that the Chiefs are in the wild card spot. Well, what if the Chiefs are a wild card team this year? Why does that matter so much to everybody? The only thing it means is that they didn't win the division. That would be the first time in the Mahomes era that he didn't win the division as a starting quarterback, but aren't they still in the playoffs? And all that would mean is that they would have to go on the road and win in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. Haven't we seen them do that? Right? Won it 2-3 years ago where everybody said, well, Mahomes has never had to win a game in this era in the playoffs on the road, and they went into Baltimore and they went into Buffalo to end up going to the Super Bowl. Didn't that happen? So I don't even think that's a story. And I think it would just be the epitome of this division being as tough as it is projected to be. That's all I'm saying. So when you talk about the AFC West, and I look at these teams, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Raiders, and I'll end with the Denver Broncos, they are going to be a contender in the playoffs. I don't want to see you jump to making them a Super Bowl contender. I'm going to put them in the same boat as I put the Washington Commanders. If they don't have the exact same season or if they make the playoffs and lose again in the first round, I don't think it's not a success. I simply think it's the team developing and building around a young quarterback, a very good defense, and a presumed Hall of Fame coach. Sometimes it takes time. Give the Broncos time. All right, when we come back from the break, I'll be answering your questions via social media. It'll be Chain Gang Chatter right after this. And welcome back into Move the Chains. Before I get to your social media questions via the Chain Gang Chat, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being able to host Move the Chains. Secondly, I want to give a shout out to all of you, the fans that have watched Move the Chains, that are supporting Move the Chains in the little over a year that we've been doing the show. Whether you watched on YouTube and subscribed, liked, and hit your notifications on that channel, whether you watched via TikTok or Facebook or the sports leader, WHTX Fox 54, it's greatly appreciated. And last but not least, to the best production crew in the business, I'm truly grateful. These young men and women get the job done every single week, and it's appreciated. Having said all of that, you know what time it is. Time for the Chain Gang Chatter. All right, questions upon questions upon questions upon questions. I look at social media when it comes to the NFL and college football all the time, and it's a lot of hilarious statements and takes that I see, but everybody has their opinion, and I just want to answer some of the questions that you have. So let's hit my first question here. How much influence has legal gambling had on the NFL? gambling in the NFL legally has had huge influence, the same way that illegal gambling had. But I think, of course, legal gambling has had an even bigger influence on the NFL because now you have things to look forward to, like the over and under, or you have things to look forward to in terms of what teams have the best odds to win the Super Bowl. Because what this does is it makes the NFL even more watchable, even more desirable, and even more likable for those people who don't necessarily care about the game but care about the end results of their financial means. And that is how you build a billion-dollar conglomerate in business like the NFL. And that's what it is. And the NFL has taken that internationally as well. So there is no area where the NFL has shown itself to be incompetent in terms of building its brand and its product and allowing people to create prop bets. So now the Super Bowl is even bigger because now you're watching the Super Bowl for the game or you're watching it for the commercials. People are watching it because they want to know how much money they can make. These are opportunities for people to build generational wealth at the drop of a hat or at the click of a button. So it makes the game that much more feasible, especially when you throw in fantasy football that gambling has had an impact on as well. So the NFL has done everything in its power to be the billion-dollar organization and the billion-dollar monster that they are, and they're not slowing down anytime soon. A lot of that has to do with legal gambling. All right, what's my next question? Well, how much stock do you put in the strength of schedule when it comes to the NFL? Nowhere near as much as I do when it comes to college football, and for two reasons. One, the NFL talent disparity is not what it is in college. And even though the gap in college has shortened a little bit, it's still nowhere near what the NFL is. The NFL gap disparity in terms of talent is this big. The margin of error is small. That's why most games in the NFL are within 6 points or less, because teams are that good and that evenly matched. And secondly, going on the road in the NFL is not what you think it is. I'm not saying it's easy to do it. It's just not what it is in college football. So the strength of schedule matters, but ladies and gentlemen, please let it matter as the season unfolds and you see what teams are. Do you think the strength of schedule that teams had with the Commanders on their roster, on their schedule last year, was the same as it was week 8 or 9? Of course not, because the Commanders showed themselves to be a good team that people didn't expect to be a good team. And that can happen inversely as well when you talk about a team who you thought would be good, wasn't that good, a la the Dallas Cowboys. So the strength of schedule matters to a certain extent, but it only matters, in my estimation, once the season has started and you see exactly who and what these teams are. All right, what do we have in my last question? What team with an over and under of 8.5 most intrigues you? To me, it's the Arizona Cardinals. And see, the NFL tells you something when they come out with these over-unders. They tell you what tiers they think these teams are going to be in. That's what the over-unders represent. They tier teams. So now you're looking at a third or fourth tier team with 8.5 along with other teams in the Arizona Cardinals, and I just don't know who they are. I don't know what the identity is on the Jonathan Gannon, and that's not me being negative. That's just me being honest. I don't know what he's trying to be, okay? I know where he comes from. I know what his lineage is, what his background is in terms of being a defensive coordinator who was with the Eagles, who helped them win at a high level. But what's Kyler Murray going to be when he's healthy? He was healthy last year. The Cardinals weren't that good, but they're also breaking in a lot of young new players. They also have the opportunity to be better if Murray wasn't hurt in the 2022 and 23 season. The NFC West, to me, is as wide open as it's ever been. While I think the Rams may be the best team in the division, I don't know that. And the Cardinals can be competitive, especially because they can run the football. So I just want to see who they are. I want to see how Kyler Murray has grown. And will this be just an team in the NFL, or will they be vying for supremacy in the NFC West? All right, when we come back from the break, do you know that people think that you have to have a receiver drafted in the first round to be good? It's not true. As a matter of fact, it's nonsense. Back with my favorite segment of the show, right after this. Welcome back to the show. I'm about to get angry again. It's time for my favorite segment of the show. It's time for the nonsense narrative. Look at the lower third and then look at my face. You have to draft a wide receiver in the first round to be competitive. Wasn't this the whole narrative when Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay, and even with Jordan Love, well, they've never given Aaron Rodgers a first-round wide receiver, and you're not going to be able to do it. I'm not even going to talk about the receivers that are phenomenal in the NFL that weren't drafted in the first round. And let me say this. I'm not saying that a team shouldn't take a wide receiver in the first round. Jamar Chase is fire. Justin Jefferson is fire. Devontae Smith is fire. Like, those guys are phenomenal. Mike Evans is fire. Will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? All I'm saying is, if you don't take a receiver in the first round, it doesn't mean that you missed the boat to give your quarterback help. You know why I know this? Because I'm going to share something with you right here. Since 2015, there have been 31 wide receivers drafted in the first round. Out of those 31, two have won Super Bowls with the team that drafted them. Devontae Smith and Nelson Aguilar. And you know what that is? The Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles drafted Nelson Aguilar, who performed well, like 8 catches for 64 or 67 yards or something like that in the Super Bowl that they won under Doug Peterson. And Devontae Smith balled out in the Super Bowl that Philly won last year. 2 receivers out of 31 in 10 years drafted in the first round won a Super Bowl with the team that they were drafted by. 6%. And you're going to sit here and tell me that a team is successful or not successful because they don't have a first-round wide receiver. Come on, man. What are we doing? Do we just fall by the wayside with the things that we say and not care about the ramifications? Just look at the reality of the situation. You can take a receiver in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round, a la Tyreek Hill, and win a Super Bowl, right? T. Higgins is phenomenal, right? So all I'm saying is, don't chagrin a first-round receiver. I'm not mad that you do it, but don't act like that's the stepping stone and a cornerstone for you being able to win a Super Bowl, because obviously it's not. All right, I'm good now. When we get back from the break, I'm going to tell you what quarterback was benched, and because of that, it forced the team to be better. Back with the final segment of Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back into the show, and it's time for the final segment of Move the Chains, which means it's time for the final drive. Bryce Young is on the rise, and Bryce Young is resilient. Now, he was benched, right, by Dave Canales. And this had nothing to do with Bryce Young, in my estimation. It had everything to do with the Carolina Panthers because they weren't ready to play him. So that's the mistake they made. And I think it was a very smart decision to bench him because you knew you were going to get your future quarterback of your franchise that you drafted number 1 overall broken at some point in time. Now they went and solidified the interior of their offensive line through free agency, right? Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, and that's why they got better. Young's on the rise. All right? You can not only catch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on the YouTube channel. Take a look. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that every time we post a video, you're notified. All right? For the best production crew in the business, it's your boy Jonathan Bam Rivers. And always remember, build every day of your life brick by brick. And for the best production crew in the business, as always, until next time here on Move the Chains, God bless.